You think people ignore you because you need better words. That is not the real reason. The real reason is more uncomfortable. Their mind decides who matters before the conversation even begins. And your own mind does this too. Every second it is guessing, predicting, sorting. It is trying to answer one silent question: what should I pay attention to right now? Neuroscientists call this predictive processing. In simple words, the brain hates wasting energy, so it keeps looking for patterns it already knows. That is why some people disappear fast. The mind feels like it already understands them. No surprise, no tension, no reason to keep looking. So the real game is not, how do I get noticed? It is, what makes the brain stop and say, hold on, this person is different. Think about an airport. Hundreds of people pass by. Most faces vanish from memory before the next corner. Then one person bends down and helps a stranger with a broken bag. Nothing dramatic, no big speech, no performance. But your brain remembers that person. Why? Because it was reading signals. Not fake confidence, not loud energy, signals. This is why competence signals matter so much. When someone keeps talking about how smart, special, or important they are, the mind hears a claim. But when someone simply behaves in a way that shows control, skill, or calm under pressure, the mind hears evidence. Claims are easy to make. Evidence is harder to fake. And here is the strange part. The nervous system also notices how easy someone is to read. If they are too eager to prove themselves, too available, too predictable, the mind relaxes and moves on. But if they are calm and a little harder to label, attention rises. Not because they are trying harder, because the brain wants to solve them. Have you ever met someone who was not the loudest person in the room, but somehow became the one you kept thinking about later? That usually happens when they break your expectations in a controlled way. Neuroscientists would call that expectation violation. It does not mean being random. It means being slightly harder to predict than people expect. Maybe you do not rush to explain yourself. Maybe you do not fill every silence. Maybe you answer in a way that is calm, direct, and a little unexpected. That tiny break in the pattern wakes the brain up. Because the mind pays more attention to things that do not fit neatly into its first guess. And once attention gets caught, curiosity takes over. Now the mind wants to know more. Quick thought experiment. Imagine two people say the exact same sentence. One says it while nervously trying to impress everyone. The other says it after a quiet pause, like they already know they do not need approval. Same words, completely different emotional effect. That second person leaves a stronger memory trace. That is the emotional trigger most people miss. Your brain does not only remember what was said, it remembers the feeling attached to it. A strange pause, a calm tone, a small moment of uncertainty. Those details make the memory stick. That is why some people stay in your head long after the moment is over. The brain does not like unfinished information. It keeps circling back until it feels complete. Now here is another piece of the puzzle. The brain often confuses rarity with value. That is the scarcity heuristic. If something feels limited, the mind assumes it must matter more. That is why availability can quietly destroy presence. When someone is always there, always easy to reach, always instantly explaining, the brain stops treating them like a signal and starts treating them like background. A constant fades. A rare thing stands out. And you can see that in real life. A small line outside a cafe pulls more attention than an empty room next door. A limited item feels more wanted than a pile of identical ones. Nothing about the object changed. Only the mind's estimate of its value changed. That is what salience looks like in action, not a definition, a reaction. The thing that stands out gets marked as important. That is why a person with a clear edge feels memorable, not because they are loud, because they are specific. The brain remembers what stands out from the crowd. It does not remember the crowd. Here is the part most people never think about. Your brain does not store people like pictures. It stores emotional fingerprints. That means someone can forget your face, forget your clothes, forget the details of the conversation, and still remember the feeling you left behind. Calmer, sharper, safer, more awake, more challenged. That is what lasts. Not trying too hard, not forcing attention, not acting bigger than you are. Just leaving a clear mark on the brain. So if you want to become impossible to ignore, stop asking how to sound important. Ask the real question instead. Where does the mind decide to spend its attention? It spends it on what breaks prediction, on what sends real signals, on what feels rare, and on what leaves an emotional fingerprint it cannot easily erase. That is why some people vanish the second they leave the room, and others stay in your head long after the room is empty.